My name is Aaron. I'm a barrister and solicitor of the High Court of New Zealand, and I recently passed the QLTS assessments on my first attempt. I have my higher rights of audience in civil matters, and I practice as a solicitor in a city law firm in London. I started my career in New Zealand in a large corporate law firm called Russell McVeigh, and I practiced there for 5 years before I decided to move to London. I'm a dispute resolution lawyer, which means that I practice on cases that are either in court or they're on their way there. My primary reason for doing the QLTS was personal. I'd made the decision to move to the UK and practice in this jurisdiction, and so I wanted to make sure that I had a good overall grasp of what the law was. It also means that people can trust that you have a level of competence across all of the different areas of the law. But it also finally means that people can be sure that you've made some commitment to the jurisdiction and that you look like you're going to be here for the medium or the long term. As is the case for many lawyers, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for the QLTS assessments, and so it was important to me that the time that I did have I used effectively and made sure I wasn't studying irrelevant material. So I signed up with QLTS School to receive the textbooks and be able to do the online questions for the MCT, and for the OSCE I signed up for the one-on-one sessions with a tutor. The textbooks weren't perfect, but they were focused and they were practical. The online questions were very good and they were a key plank of my preparation for the MCT. On the OSCE side, I found that the tutor was very flexible, giving me the one-on-one sessions, but I was also really impressed that he helped me lay out the time that I had before the exam into sessions for each subject, helping me plan my time. Both the MCT online questions and the OSCE one-on-one sessions would have to be joint winners for me. So on the MCT side, there's a huge amount of material that is covered by the course, and it's quite difficult to know how some of those areas are going to be tested. The online questions that were available were a really good way of seeing the way that the content could be tested, but also gave you a dry run of actually answering questions in test conditions. On the OSCE side, the one-on-one tuition was a similar thing. So the OSCE, I knew the kinds of skills I was expected to know when I was going to go into the test, but I didn't know how they would be assessed. And so having somebody go through those with you in a mock test environment was a really good way of preparing for what you could expect in the OSCE itself. I have a very demanding job, and so studying during the week wasn't really realistic. I think I did most of my study for the MCT reading textbooks in the weekend under a tree in Kensington Gardens. I also did quite a lot of the online questions and test conditions at home. I started studying about 6 months before the MCT, and then I was only doing a few hours each weekend flicking over the textbooks, but by the month before I would have been spending most of my weekends revising. I also did spend a couple of days off work preparing before each of the assessments. On the OSCE side, I was more prepared, and that was primarily because my OSCE one-on-one tutor helped me plan out my time at the outset, allocating the 2 months or whatever it was into weekly or fortnightly assessments and subject areas, and so that meant I had the motivation between each of those to study that area properly. My firm was very supportive, giving me both financial support and a few days off before each of the assessments. I felt well prepared for the MCT, primarily because of the online assessments that I'd done. I felt less prepared for the OSCE, and that was just because even after the mock assessments it was harder to know what was coming. My role and responsibilities at work haven't changed since the QLTS assessments, though I am heading to Cambridge Judge Business School at the end of the year to start studying an MBA. The QLTS has made me more comfortable in giving English legal advice. Most areas of the corporate law are quite similar between English and New Zealand legal systems, but having the broad overview of what is the same and what is different that I got through the QLTS has meant that I'm more comfortable in knowing which areas I can rely on my New Zealand expertise and which areas I need to rely on what I've learned through the QLTS. I think a preparation course for the MCT is going to be useful for most people. If you've been in private practice for a number of years, you'll probably find that the preparation course is more necessary for the MCT than it is for the OSCE, and that's just because the OSCE is designed to test the skills that you will use every day in private practice. That isn't to say that a preparation course is not useful or isn't helpful in preparing for the OSCE assessments, just because even if you know the skills that you're going to be tested on, knowing how they're going to be tested and the format of that assessment is going to give you a bit of an edge when you come to doing the assessments and make sure that you perform at your best. I would recommend that anyone who is heading towards the QLTS assessments start preparing as early as possible. And that's not just because it'll mean you perform better, but also because by the time you get to the QLTS assessments in the month before or maybe 2 months before, it'll just be all about getting the information in, cramming, trying to do better, and it'll be a trial. You won't really enjoy it. But if you start earlier, then there's a chance that you'll spend the first couple of months enjoying learning the differences between your home jurisdiction and the England and Wales system. I'm sure that many people don't really have a choice, and if you're moving to England to work, you'll probably have to qualify as an English solicitor. If you are in the fortunate position of having a choice and deciding whether or not to do the QLTS assessments, I'd still recommend it for most people who plan to have at least a medium-term career in England or want to have a career in England. The ability to give correct legal advice is obviously essential, but it's far from enough. Increasingly, I think clients are expecting us to understand their businesses and their industries to an intimate level and to be able to provide clear, practical guidance on what they should actually do given the legal position. It also helps if you can get along with your clients. Not only will you enjoy your job more, but it'll allow you to provide better client service, which at the end of the day is what law firms should all be about.